Right now. Hello. Hi. Um, I'm Catalina, and I'm here to talk about the obvious. And this is about my designing skills. This is how I can draw. A lot of the people that I meet come to my talks because they say it's about design as graphic design. I'm going to talk about design as a methodology or a way of solving problems. So it's going to be design as a methodology and design more as a mindset. Before going into the actual talk, I want to know who here is not into coding. Is anyone not into coding here? Because most of the times I ask who is doing product, who is doing design. But of course, being at a coding conference, hi guys, I expected most of the people here to be doing that. But since everybody is doing coding, I just want to say one thing before going into the presentation. Although the majority of the things you might think they are common knowledge and common sense, I will go through them because the way I talk about these things might make you see things from a slightly different angle. So please be open because although the first thing to do is, oh, I already know what machine learning is. I already know what artificial intelligence means. I am trying to tell some stories in a different way, from a different perspective, from a designer's perspective. So please stay with me, and whenever you have that feeling that oh, I don't know this or I shouldn't be here in this room, you are first of all free to go whenever you want. I would encourage you not to do so and stay up until the end. Maybe you have some questions that you can address and start talking about that. About me. This is basically me showing my knowledge of football. I worked for 7 years in a bank and then for 2 years at FIFA doing the experiences for the world's football game, the FIFA game. I was able to be the designer for the World Cup. I don't know how many of you play FIFA. I would expect a lot of people here at least to know about the game. So I was designing the experience for the World Cup, which was launched 1 year ago. And also for some of the new functionalities with the FIFA 2019, which is the Volta. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. However, in January, after 2 years and more years of corporate world, I resigned because I said I want to do more different projects from which I can learn faster and change domains faster. So I co-founded this company 2 years ago, but in January I said I want to be a full-time dedicated person inside the company. So right now I'm doing consultancy for companies. I'm into agriculture projects. I'm into Horeca, designing for Carrefour or for big corporations who want to just do better products. I work as well with some startups, doing some apps in education because that's a topic that is very dear to me, as well as personal development. That's about me professionally when it comes to, the reason I'm here is also because I'm a Google expert. I don't know how many of you know about the Google Experts program, the Google Developers Experts. I'm an expert for design, and recently I also got my master's in being a design sprint master, which is probably how some of you might know. Design sprints started as a process of fast iterating and fast building products inside the Google Ventures. So they have this academy that's the only one accredited, let's say, the only one certified to offer this kind of certifications. So I got that, and yeah, I help companies develop better products and experiences through this design sprint process, but not only. Personally, besides the professional, I would describe myself as any of you can find me on Instagram. One thing I would say about me is I can dance anytime, anywhere, anyhow. I discovered that this is the thing that somehow, this is a process that I have to change my mood. And why I talk about this is because I think that each one of us should be able to find or at least search for that thing that makes you change perspectives or flip the coin to a different state of, I don't know, being, well-being, seeing the world or stuff like that. That for me is dancing. But please don't play any music right now because I might start dancing, right? Okay, designing for voice interactions. Why I picked this? A lot of the people that I know and that I met, from products to programmers to people who actually start such a product, is they say it's easy because we're talking, right? Human communication is at the core of human interactions. However, that is not that easy. It's where we know we can do this because, and we have to do that because technology is changing really fast, and there's a lot of things happening nowadays for the consumers and for people to consume. So there's a bundle of things, and the human brain is too assaulted by all the things that a person has to. So we have options, we have apps, we have too many things, we have too many photos, we have thousands of photos, we have music, we have a lot of things that we would need help. And we expect machines to do that because machines can move faster than we do and can do the things that we don't really want to do. We don't want to put energy into, let's say, delete the photos that we don't want. We take hundreds of photos and then we keep them. We pay for storage because we are not able to delete those ones that we no longer need or use. So there are things that machines can do faster and then that can do for us in a better and faster way. And voice interactions, in my opinion, assistants will start being more popular because, not because we really as people who want to develop products want to do that, but because people will need that. And whenever people will need that more and more, and it's gonna be something that you can no longer not do, it's better that you're prepared for that. And of course you will say, well, I'm prepared to design for voice because I talk daily, right? I interact with people. Well, let's not go into all the problems that communication faces between people, right? Because if we're getting there, then we can start talking about the problems that can happen between humans and machines. So, without further ado, I want to say how I built this presentation and what to expect from. I said, okay, what do I want to talk about when it comes to designing for voice interactions? And of course, because I like to do it that way backwards, I started looking at, okay, what voice interactions are. Voice interactions, of course, are happen between who? Between two actors, at least, right? So between whom am I going to talk? It's going to be between people and machines. So I'm going to start with some things about people, because whenever you're designing for people, you want to know some psychology aspects about people, because you really need to consider that when you're designing for people. Then some things about technology and the future, and nevertheless, because we're here for voice, about voice. And then because assistants are powered by artificial intelligence and machine learning, I'm going to also talk about that and why and what is about AI. And then I'm gonna slightly go through the design process, what is the design process and what are the steps and the tools that we can use in the design process, and why you need to know this, why the design process can help any product development. And then in the end, I'm gonna go to the practical aspect of things, which some of you wanted to hear right at the beginning, but what I want to say, and that I always say, is that nowadays we look for shortcuts. We look for recipes, and I'm not gonna give you that recipe. In order to design for voice, you have to do that, and that. I'm gonna say, here's the basics of stuff that you need to, or at least you should be looking into, human psychology aspects, design, and so on and so forth. And then what is the framework that I propose you to use whenever you're designing for voice. Of course, this is not the only process, this is not the only methodology. I encourage you to take this and to experiment and to try some other things. So, some things about people. The first thing that I want to start with is people are storytellers. So you hear that often. Storytelling is a buzzword, such as innovation, such as design thinking, there's a lot of things. But when I say this, and why I put it into these slides, although I'm not a buzzword person, I try to go as far as possible from buzzwords, is that we come we as humans, come from a long period of time when we didn't have technology, when we didn't have books, when we didn't have tools to write, so we would base our knowledge only on stories that we would tell to each other, and we would pass them on to the next generations as stories or as legends and so on. People are so connected, and the brain is so rooted into hearing stories and into hearing pieces of information that are somehow told in a story-like manner, that they will nevertheless look that unconsciously. They won't say, I need stories from you. They won't ask for that. But as long as you try to put things, be it the way you learn something, be it the way you can use a product, regardless of what you are telling people, if you're trying to tell it in a story manner, like having, getting my attention with a cue, and then having an introduction, and then not a one-page introduction, but just packaging it into something that I can relate to, people will pay more attention to that. Tell them stories, and be careful if you're not telling people the stories that you, as your brand, as your product, want people to hear. They will make up stories. And you should also pay attention to that, because people use your products the way they want to use it, and then they will create stories that relate to them. And then you might launch your product, and in 1 year, you might hear some stories that you weren't aware that people tell about your product, and that might be a little bit too late. And related to stories, there's also this one, and not related to stories, but related to the way we used to live. People are social, and of course, you're going to say that, of course, we're social. We have Facebook, we have Instagram. Of course, people want to share things. But I'm not necessarily talking about the online social part of life, because that's obvious, and I think that's more related to the status and to the way we want others to perceive us. When I stay social, I'd rather look at the offline experience of people's lives, because we really need human connection. One-to-one, one-to-many, we need to be close to other people, because that's how we lived for thousands of years. So that's where we will get good feelings, and we will get happiness from. So try to design, even if you're in the digital world, and even if you're in the tech world, try to design for people's life in a better way, and that means getting people together. Because if you're alienating them through technology, and if you're giving them only digital tools, they won't necessarily have this one-to-one interaction and this social interaction that we so much need. And in the end, although you're gonna have a lot of users and a lot of engaging and active users, they might really appreciate if you take them offline and do something with them and make their lives at least 50% or 15%, sorry, as it used to be offline. Because I don't know how many of you look at your friends. So many people around me say that they want to go to the countryside, to have a more relaxed life, to not be assaulted by all the information on all the bustling of the city. And that goes to what's happening in the digital world, because there's too much happening in the digital world. Okay, people are lazy, and of course we know that. Don't give them instruction manuals, things that they have to read in order to perform something, and then do the work for them. If you can perform to do some things automatically for them, do that. And of course tell them that you did that, because you want people to know that you performed an extra job for them, and it required an extra development session, an extra effort on your side, and really understanding that from the people, so that you really cared about them enough, so much that you did this for them. But of course, I always recommend, if you autocorrect, so for instance, let's say I'm so tired of receiving those forms, error forms, where they tell me, hey, your phone number is not good. If you know that my phone number should start with the country code, of course, maybe you can use the location to identify my country code, but nevertheless, maybe it's just the 0 in front of the number. If you know that my phone number should start with a 0, and I omitted that, please put that and tell me, hey, I put a 0 in front of your number because that was an error, but I didn't ask you to go there to scroll and to just autocorrect that. So please do that, because of course, it requires an extra effort from the user, do the work for them, of course. Then human memory is complicated. And there's, of course, you say, of course we forget, but what an interesting fact that I want to share about this is that we don't remember the thing that happened when it happened. We remember the last time we accessed that memory. So with each time that we access a memory, we degrade it because we remember less, we access less of the memory of that memory. Of course, it's, well, that's really smart of me to say that. Okay, but keep in mind that people tend to forget a lot of things, and people tend to care only about the things that they care about, which is having fun, family, friends, going out, not necessarily the tools that help me, I don't know, perform a payment or see the weather, or that's you know, that has to be streamlined and really easy, because I don't care about that. I just need to take the information from that. It's not a game in which I want to invest time in learning how to play that game. It's something that it helps my life be slightly better, because I can take my umbrella if it's gonna rain, and if not, it's gonna pour a lot of water on me, right? Then people make mistakes, and I already covered this. If there's a mistake you identified, try as much as possible to correct that, because people will very much appreciate that. People have limitations, and of course we say, hey, it's other people who have limitations, it's not me. Most of the times when we're designing, when we're building product, we think as the people, as there's a bunch of guys there who are gonna just use our product and it's them. I want to say that people sometimes are impaired, and it's not people, it's we sometimes are impaired. How many of you ever felt that they had an impairment? Raise up hands. Okay, what kind of impairment? Just whoever wants to share. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of that's one impairment that I'm gonna cover. Something else? Exactly. Yes. Sorry. Then. Okay, correct. So there's these kind of impairments that we all have. One, nevertheless, is hearing, because, and I put it on a different, on a separate slide, because I see a lot of people with so many headphones. Well, I see a lot of people with headphones, so many people with headphones. We like to listen to music, and whenever we're walking down the street, we're biking. Hopefully, you're not doing that because it's not safe. We cannot hear, and that's an impairment. That's not a permanent impairment. That's a temporary one, but if we want to design things for these contexts, for people who might be walking down the street and you want to have directions for the maps for them, and you're not aware that people, most of the times, whenever they are wandering the streets or walking, they are using headphones and listening to music, they won't be able to hear any kind of sound that your app might make, even if it's Bluetooth, or you might need some how do you say, notification requests from them. Then this one, it's already covered. You might not know. Nobody said that. You cannot see well because you're using the phone outside, and maybe your battery is draining off, because we see a lot of phones that are not good at batteries. So you're keeping your brightness lower, or the sun is glaring into your screen. So that's not being able to see, and it's not yours. It's not an impairment that you have. It's an impairment caused by the technology, but nevertheless, you're not able to see. So you're not able to see what's written on your screen. So you might authorize a payment with too much money, and then you cannot do undo, because we don't think of undoing actions. What do you think is this? Colorblind, of course. I'm so happy that you say that. This is how some people see the world, and it's a beautiful way of seeing the world. I always, whenever I'm talking about accessibility and talking to people that have color blindness, is of course there's not so much people who see this, who have this kind of color blindness. There's various one, and there's larger color blindness, and there's smaller. We see different colors, people see different colors differently, and apparently language is very connected to that. Different countries, well, different people who speak differently. So for instance, in Japan, you might have some different ways of perceiving colors from people, because the way they learn language affects your brain, and also it affects the way you perceive some colors. That's a very interesting fact. So we already covered this. There was also limited dexterity mentioned. Whenever you're doing your groceries, you might not be able to use your phone because you don't have your hands, or you might be physically challenged temporarily, like you broke your hand and you cannot use your hand anymore for, I don't know, 2 months, so you cannot use properly your phone. But then again, might be that you're in wintertime, you're going snowboarding, and then you have big gloves. For, for regular gloves, you have gloves that are thought for, are built especially for this, for being able to use your phone. But whenever you're bored snowboarding, it's such a huge gloves that you cannot use your phone, not even to hold it, but to just type it. Okay, mentally challenged. And whenever I talk about this, a lot of people say, well, people are stupid because they don't know how to use our app, so maybe they should go again and read the user guide or stuff like that. I would say very much we should treat our users with respect, and whenever we think of people being mentally challenged, we should also think at the moment when you're too tired, or when you're under the influence of some medicine. And it's not your fault, it's simply that you're in such a context that your brain cannot function properly. So being mentally challenged is not something we should avoid thinking, because we're not saying our users are stupid. Is thinking that maybe if it's an app for going out in the city during weekend times, you might expect people to be using your app after some drinks, right? And after some drinks, you're not thinking quite straight. Sometimes, I'm not saying any of you do that, but sometimes alcohol actually affects our ability to think as we do in regular context. Illiterate, that's again a very touchy one that we don't want to touch upon, and it's a sensitive one, because we say when people are illiterate, they are also stupid. That's not the case. I might be speaking English, I might be speaking Romanian, but whenever I'm going to China, I'm not able to understand anything. That makes me an illiterate person, because I'm not able to understand what's written on anything, not only in an app or anything. So try to see how international is your app and where it's used. You can do that from analytics and try to develop things. If you see that a lot of people in some countries that are not supported by you from a language perspective are used, try to start maybe developing for that if it's a business opportunity there. And then I want to tell you that there is no such thing as the average user. In the businesses I work for, so many times I heard that, the average user, our average user does that and that. Don't think of that. If you want to think of users and usage, look at analytics and try to see who's doing what, where are they coming from, what pages they use, what country they use, what phones they use, and stuff like that. There is no, and all the context, not all the context, but the majority of the cases, there is no average user. And whenever I hear this, I oftenly heard this from people who just want to make a case for their arguments, and they just throw it like that. Well, I know that the average user, and then they just want to appear smart. It's not the case. Try to put it down into real things, real reports, real data on the users, because thank God we have data. That's why we have AI so fun, so cool these days, because we have tons of data. Okay, technology and the future. And voice, of course, I said because we're talking about voice, I'm gonna talk some things about voice, kidding. How many of you know this, recognize this? Okay, it's Her, the movie, right? Probably the ones who mentioned, recognized it, saw it. This was in 2013. So it was 6 years ago, if my math is correct, it was 6 years ago. You would say, of course, back then, probably things weren't happening. But I want to show you something else that didn't only happen now. It happened already. Can you see? So, fans of Black Mirror probably know this show. Um, this is this was a game, and is still a game. It happens in Japan. This is one of the three characters this game has, and the game simulates basically being in a relationship. And you're able for male, of course. It's designed mainly for male. I don't really know why, and I don't want to go into that discussion. But it was a success that the game started in 2009, and by 2013, it was really, really huge in Japan. Of course, you will say that hey, it's the context of Japan, where we know people are workaholic, work a lot, and they don't have time to invest anymore, and they don't have the energy to invest anymore in relationships. But because, guess what? People are social, they need this kind of being appreciated and having someone next to you that simulates a relationship that tells you you are important, because that's why we need relationships, because we need to know that we are cared of and someone cares for us. So the game was really successful, and it happened already. It's again, we're talking about the future, and the case that I want to say to make is that the future is here and was here. And that if you think that we still have time to design and to learn for some things, the reality is that we should move faster in VR, in AR, in AI, in assistance, in everything, because it's going to be, whenever there's going to be a really big and good competitor, a company that's going to design really well for voice interactions, that's when everybody will need to be in that business and in that boat. And the sooner you start experimenting with this and test it, not experimenting in a design lab-ish context when you only have simulations, not real interactions, the sooner the better. The sooner you do that, the better. So I already mentioned this, we're designing for voice, right? How hard can it be? Because of course, we've been communicating for thousands of years. How hard can it be? Well, you probably also know this one. It's gonna be shorter. How many of you know it?
Voice recognition technology in this lift. I heard about this.
Voice recognition technology in a lift in Scotland. You ever tried voice recognition technology?
No.
They don't do Scottish accents.
11.
Could you please repeat that?
11.
11. 11.
11.
Could you please repeat that?
11.
Whose idea was this? You need to try an American accent.
11. 11.
Okay, and this goes for some seconds that I just want to spare. It has a lot of errors here. The easiest fix was to just have some offline, some mechanical inputs. Of course, if the elevator, the lift is not moving, then maybe I should be able to use something else. Of course, it goes like, could you please repeat that? And then in the end, the assistant says, if you just want to go out of these doors, please simply say, please open the doors. If you're not able to say 11, how are you going to be able to say, please open the doors, of course? But the thing is that there's a lot of assistants being already developed. Most of them are in English because English is an international language. But there's a lot of languages spoken in this world, and there's so many, there's less assistance in regional languages that we really need. Of course, English is international and it's simple to design for that because we already have a lot of pre-trained models in English. But try to think of all the people, old people and young kids that don't know English that might really need an assistant, and then try to think that if you have success and if you're doing very well for a smaller target audience, then you might have success because some other big company might see you and might want to use your product, although it's for such a smaller group. Try not to go international just because it's fun to go international and it's there, it has the money opportunities, because sometimes from smaller groups and from really understanding a big problem might really bring you success. 8 billion assistants estimated by 2023, that's, I cannot even think of that. We might need a master assistant for that, of course. And the ecosystem of the user is really increasing. When I was at Google I/O, I saw a lot of talks around foldables. When I saw so many talks at Google I/O around foldables, I said, hey, maybe foldables, there's a thing around foldables, because if Google does talks around foldables, there might be some business growing happening there. So if you're in the assistant domain, consider the ecosystem that is growing and that is at the disposal of the users, because we're not talking only about screens and computers and watches. We're talking, of course, of Alexa, of assistants that are in home, of displays, of cars. Cars manufacturers develop their own system. Of course, we have Android operational system that wants to go to be there as the only platform, but nevertheless, you have various platforms. So try to consider the increasing number of entry points, of touch points that the user has, and think of the fact that if I have a person, an assistant that's helping me, it might not help me only when I'm using my phone, it might help me when I'm in my car, or when I get at my place and it recognizes that I entered my home, and then it takes the conversation from there, right? Okay, AI, but why AI? Because I said AI can do a lot of things that people cannot do as fast and as good as machines. First and foremost, I want to say, don't do AI just because it's cool and because it might bring the money in. For so many years, in the last 2 or 3 years, I saw AI and machine learning brought to the table, mentioned at the table just because it sells. In a lot of pitches, we heard it has machine learning because it was cool, because it meant you are smart and meant the investors weren't smart enough to ask deeper questions around machine learning and to really see if you're doing machine learning. Because whenever you're talking about machine learning, you might have a slight confusion, not you, but those who are mentioning machine learning. Is it a logical scheme? Or is really machine learning? Because if you have a branching tree that has options, and if it's this happens, that's not machine learning. Machine learning, it's basically, well, I'm gonna get to that. But it's basically something that is able to simulate human thought and human intelligence. And if that is not happening, that's not machine learning. Most of the people, when asked about AI, they imagine this. Recently, they imagined this. You probably imagine this. And it's basically something that learns how to imitate the human thought and human intelligence. What I like to say, and I already said that, AI for me is an assistant that does the things for you, and machine learning should be approached as a kid. You learn how a kid goes into being a grown-up, what you teach the baby, how you teach the first steps, and then how you teach an algorithm, how you give it sound, and then you give that system a natural language processing system, and then how they interpret context and stuff like that, is similar to the way we teach kids to deal about life. So of course, because I made that parallel and kids learn, of course, AI learns continuously from experience. And if it doesn't learn from interaction to interaction to interaction to iteration, then it's not necessarily machine learning for me, it's static machine learning, of course. And it's taught, not programmed. And then I said that, it needs a lot of data, and the lucky part nowadays is, and it has two sides of the story, because you're lucky enough that you have pre-trained models. The bad side of things is that maybe you don't have it in your language and you don't have it in so many languages. And another bad side of things is that it's already pre-trained and you might need it to be a bit personalized to your context. So try to be smart enough to just use these pre-trained models and try to see how you can adapt them to what you need to design. The human AI interaction, and I want to talk about a bit, again, I'm going to go faster through this because you already know this. A business has an intent. A business wants to solve something, and then it has the data, and then it has to comply to the policies that happen in the world. And then you have the machine that understands some inputs, and then it reasons, it takes some decisions that this has to go over there, and then based on knowledge there, it interprets what it has to respond, and then it responds to the user, and then the user performs an action, and the machine has to also be able to understand the user's reaction, because it learns from that. The machine learns not only from what we learn the machine to do, but also that's because it's a machine learning system. It learns from the interaction with the user, so be able to also put at the disposal of the users feedback option, or look at the branches that the user did to be able to interpret the actions that happened over there. And then the user also learns, and then there's an outcome. This is a binom, I would like to say, system, because each of the entities over here learn from one another. Sorry for that. The machine learns from the user's input, and also from more from the response of the user, and then also the user learns how to interact with the machine. And then design. What happens with design is design solves problems. As I already mentioned, in order to have better experiences, you need to be curious to see what is not working good in the world, and start asking questions about that, not only about yourself and about your problem, about my mother's or my friend's problems, because luckily we are different. So there's a lot of people facing the same problem, but differently. And then it also needs empathy, which is really a difficult one, because having empathy, it's not feeling for the other one. Most of the times I hear having empathy is being able to be in the shoes of that person. And I want to stress out that empathy is not necessarily being able to feel what the other is feeling, but having the capacity of understanding that someone is not feeling well, although we don't understand that, right? Having this respect of understanding that that person is having a really bad time not being able to open the door, and he's feeling stupid that he's not able to open the door, and I'm not able to understand that because I know how to open the door. So having that empathy is really important. And then how things happen in the way we develop stuff is we have strategy, we do some discovery, which means research, interview, stuff like that. We do some analysis, and then we do design. And then we do development. We start doing development, which is coding, programming, stuff like that. We do more development. Only after some time, we realize, hey, we need to test. And we're not testing with users. We're testing if the app is working properly in terms of testing it as designed. Is this button working? Not if the user is understanding that this is a button. And after we look at that, we do some more development. And then we launch the product. And after 2 months, we realize that it's not used as intended because we didn't test it with the users. So what we're proposing in design is allocate time to, and these are not in terms of effort, look at strategy, then do your research well. observe people, talk to them, don't be afraid because people don't bite. Go out there and just be curious about asking some things to people. People don't bite, luckily. And then look at the data that you have, at analytics, at research, the research that you did, at the observations that you have. And then only after that, only after you have journey maps, only after you have some personas, which is another way of looking at people instead of segments. A persona is someone who has a name, someone who has a behavior, some real life needs and desires. And then after you do design, you do testing before going to the development, because you really need to prototype something as easy as and as simple as you can do it in order to go at the user, show it, and not guide it through the experience, not guide your user to the experience. Just show your app or show your assistant, mimic some interactions, and get feedback without doing any development. You will say that this takes time. No, this doesn't take time. This can take up to 1 month compared to doing 6 months of development and then realizing you developed something that's not working. So this is iterative because after the testing, you might go back to the design, or you might test and realize that you didn't understand the problem well. So you might go to the research phase. This is a human-centered process because all the time it has the user in the core of it. And then let's get practical. Roma Pasta. This is a restaurant that has it's in doing food, of course, and delivering food. And it's a traditional restaurant because it's an Italian one. Italians really love their food, so it's a very, very traditional. However, they understood the technology, and they understood that technology can help their users. So they said, we want to go into building an assistant that could help our business become better. Before that, when it comes to designing for conversation, I want to say that this framework is mostly for the intent and the data policy. I think there's 2 slides, this is the wrong one. And we're in the designing phase, right? We're not doing the discovery. I'm not telling about the discovery sessions and about how you do analysis. I'm just talking about how you're designing for some intents that you as business want or understood you have to design. 3 principles. When it comes to designing for voice, there's 3 main principles if you want to keep in mind. One is cooperative principles. We believe that the other entity in the conversation wants to help us. So we expect truthful, honest, and really simple interactions. We expect that. We as people, whenever we're talking with an assistant, we understand that that assistant is there to help us. So that's one. The second one is turn-taking. It's not just the person talking, it's not just the assistant talking. We have to understand that this is two-sided, and we need to ask for something and then expect for something, and the users also expect that, right? So take turns in conversation. And the third one is designed for user context. And of course, you're going to say, of course we're designing for user context. Do you? Because when we're in the business world, we think of what is going to bring us money. So we think of, hey, we would like people to use us in, I don't know, around in the evening time around 6 or 8, because that's when they need to eat, right? But maybe with the fasting guys who are into intermittent fasting, they have other needs. And if those are the guys that are willing to use technology and to order through your restaurant, you might understand their needs, not the needs you as a business have in order to make money. Okay, so designing for Roma Pasta. Whenever you want to start an assistant, the thing that you should consider first and foremost, is who you are, right? Because your assistant will not be Alexa, will not be Google Assistant, because guess what? That is taken. Luckily, that is taken. So you need your own voice. In order to have your own voice that is recognizable and that is according to your brand principles, you need to start from that. So, of course, you should start from brand values. If you don't have them, there's an opportunity to build them and to make them happen. Look at that. I already wrote some things here. Roma Pasta is into traditional, so they probably will have a more or less traditional approach. Is it? Or maybe they might be funny, or what else? Brand values, what do they care about? What you as a brand care? That's also important, because whenever you will hear some interactions in the user, you might prompt them with some other interactions that will help that user understand that this is you. Tone of voice, if it's funny, if it's, I don't know, you might take a personality, you might take Jamie Oliver as a voice to be your assistant for the people, because you understand that these guys that are ordering at Roma Pasta are Jamie Oliver's fans, #1 fans. So you might pay, I'm just saying, you might think of some really nice personalities to use their voice. And then, after you looked at the brand personalities and brand values, you will start looking at what are the tasks that you will want to solve. Is it just ordering food, or is it also offering an experience for the people who regularly order at you? Because we're no longer in the services world. We're living the experience economy. Services already, a lot of people fight for better services, and the quality of the services increased. Nowadays, people fight for experiences. If you think that you're in the ordering or in the food industry, you might think that you're in the cooking if you want to go further towards experience economy. You're in the cooking industry, or you're into living or eating or having a healthy lifestyle, because people sometimes nowadays, whenever they think of eating, they think of having a healthy lifestyle, and they choose the food that offers them, responds to them, to that need. So even if you're a restaurant, you might think of that, and you might start helping people having a healthier lifestyle, although that's not your business, although you're not selling products for that. But if you're understanding the frictions, the real frictions your user face whenever they are eating, if you're solving that, then you might have a better engagement from their side if you're putting some effort into designing for that. So in this case, some of the tasks that they thought of was offering time for their users to cook with their dear ones. You might have a kid that you want to spend some time with, and then they prepare some actions and some experiences for that to happen. And then, if you decided what are the tasks of the users and the things that you want your users to interact with your assistant, then you have to think of what are these people doing whenever they might be doing this experience. Where are they? What technology they are using? So start looking at the user. In this case, the main user of your assistant is just 2 minutes. Is Dominique, that has a kid and that wants to interact with the kid while cooking and while preparing the dinner. And enjoying a good time. So all the motivations, anxieties, environment, time factors, other assumptions that you might have to be here in this chart, because they might help you afterwards to better fill in this data. Because what you have to do now is fill in this, what is the name of your assistant? What's the backstory? What's the character of it? How is he interacting? Is he humorous? Does he have humor? I always say humor works. What might say? And then you should start doing some dialogues. It's just case by case, what the assistant says, what do you expect the person to say, what the assistant responds to that, what the person says to that. And how do you test this? Is as simple as playing role playing, right? You just call in some other people from your team and give them these scripts and ask them to interact. And then the way they will interact with that, it's going to give you more input on how you have to better develop this assistant. So please, when you're designing for voice, don't just put intents and responses. Try to put them into real life by having real people invited at the table and having these scripts played, and also interfering with some other people. Because whenever you're cooking with your kid, it's not only Dominique who's gonna interact with your assistant. Joey, who's Dominique's kid, will also interfere, because kids are kids and people are people. They might interact with the assistant, but something else happens in the environment, and then the assistant hears something else, and then what do? You need to ask for correction, you need to ask for input. Hey, what did you really want to say? And stuff like that. And you are not able to realize these situations unless you play them. And with voice, it's really simple that you can test them as simple as role-playing. And then whenever you have done your improvements and your interactions, just call someone, put, I don't know, a window in front of them, a mirror, so that they cannot see you, and ask them to perform some tasks with your assistant. And someone in the back responds to that. And then see how that goes. Hopefully, I'm going to be able to put this presentation into somewhere so that you can have the framework. Basically, this is the key takeaways: learn my behavior and make things easy. Be human, don't be a robot. Be smarter than me, but please don't make me dumb. And if you make me feel dumb, try to play it with humor, because humor always works. Technology is sexy, but making life easier is more sexy, so don't use AI just because it's the cool kid on the block. Stop falling for your idea, go and test it with people, because that's when you're gonna get better ideas. And then you are not the user, you're not designing for you, you're not designing again for your mom, for your friends, for whoever. You want to design for more people that have more needs and more frictions that you can possibly imagine. So please go there and talk to people. And please reach out for me if you want to ask questions, because I overtalked again. Thank you.